Hey, hey, hello, and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is returning guest Aydin Paladin, who's an island dweller off the coast of Britain and a YouTuber in her own right. And recently she's been doing some videos about the Trivers-Willard hypothesis that charts the sex rate at birth of male to female, that ratio between male and female, and how that's indicative of hard times or good times and what that means about how well society is actually doing. Fascinating, rather brainy. Glad to have her on. We talk about that and a variety of other topics. You can find her work linked in the description, as well as links to support this channel. Without further ado, here is Aydin Paladin. So you're on like some sort of island?
Yeah.
Yeah. How is that? How is it like?
It's
Has it
nice.
has it kind of
Peaceful.
changed your connection to the world in a way?
Probably it'd be difficult to completely define it, I suppose. But yeah,
Yeah.
I can't imagine it hasn't. Well, I mean, I live it's in the Channel Islands, Guernsey, so, which
Hmm.
is off the coast of France, but it's culturally, you know, governmentally largely it's the UK.
Yeah.
So
Is it a DMZ, like a demilitarized zone in the?
no, it's actually like an ANCAP paradise place. It's
Oh,
a tax
really?
haven. Well, in some ways, it's a tax haven. So there's a lot
Huh.
of banks and things here that a lot of different companies will put their headquarters here.
Yeah. What's
Uh,
the cuisine like?
it's British, so
Oh, okay. All right, then that's all that really matters.
which is quite good. It gets made fun of all the time, but it's just like good, simple food. Chippies and stuff like that all over the
Yeah.
place. But yeah, it's lovely living here. It's beautiful too. I think, what was it in Game of Thrones? I think that the Sapphire Island is loosely based on either Guernsey or Jersey. I don't remember which one.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh,
In a recent, probably maybe even your most recent stream with a friend of yours talking about this sex birth rate.
mhm.
It's really interesting stuff. But you said that you don't have any path to citizenship.
No, not here.
No.
Um, no, because it's just they're very, which I think is pretty cool of them, honestly. Uh, i- if you both of your parents need to have like history going back here
Oh.
hundreds of years, essentially. There's no way for you can become a permanent resident, but you can't become a citizen.
Okay.
Only people who are Guerns can be citizens of Guernsey.
Oh, of that specific. So
Mhm.
it does have its own kind of identity
Yeah,
then.
yeah. I mean, again, culturally, like people probably wouldn't. The language Guernesas is French or is very similar to French. They're
Yeah.
Normans originally, so yeah. But I mean, it's a dead language nearly. Almost no one speaks it except for a few words. But yeah, own identity. I don't know if that's also the case for Jersey. That's where Henry Cavill's from. Was like one island over.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
He he doesn't have an accent. He's got an American accent, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, he puts it on, but if go watch an interview with him and he'll has what sounds like
Okay.
a British accent. The accent doesn't sound any really I'd say majorly different. Maybe if
Yeah.
you maybe to some people it would. I'm sure my husband would think it's much different, but certainly to American ears it wouldn't. It would just sound British, you
He
know.
is such a haunting person when I watch him like give a
Yeah.
speech or something. There's
Hmm.
some really deep depth, almost like this magical, mystical
Oh yeah.
feeling. Is that indicative of the people in these islands or?
Maybe. I know at least here there is a huge amount of radium in the water, so there's also a ton of cancer research that happens here
Oh,
because
really?
really high rates of cancer, so that's fun. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Do
Yeah.
you
Just
have like
don't
a
drink the
special
water.
filters? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just don't drink water and drink
Okay.
something else. Get something imported. I don't know. Uh, but that's just the rock is irradiated that it's on or that
Hmm.
the civilization here is built on top of largely.
You're religious. Are you spiritual and religious? I mean, do you have a sense of like the magic of the land
Oh, for
or
sure.
yeah.
It's uh definitely I have experienced that I think too in America. at least growing up in West Virginia in particular, where you're in these hills and there's nothing around, but there have been people who've lived there for hundreds and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And there's a very strange spirituality, I would say, ambient spirituality of the nature that exists there. And here, I can drive. We go drive a mile down the road, and there's a menhir or something, or all these ancient structures that are 2,000 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah, the castle in town. I mean, I think the earliest constructions of that's also probably about 1,000 years old. Just those kind of timescales don't exist,
Yeah.
obviously, in the U.S. or Canada. So yeah, it is very different to move from America where everything is comparatively quite new,
Hmm.
into a place where things are very, very old.
Yeah.
Very different vibe.
I was talking to one of the Lotus Eater bros, Josh
Mhm.
Firm or Firme.
Yes, yes.
Sweet lad. And when I talk to the Lotus Eater guys and other people in Britain, especially of the based variety,
Mhm.
one pressing concern is mass importation of foreigners
Yes.
and just the total devastation that's wreaking on British identity, and
Yeah.
then trying to strategize. Well, how does Britain come back from this? And Josh was talking about this connection to the land that's
Hmm.
reminded me a lot of how Tolkien
Yeah.
describes the people of the Shire, the hobbits,
Hmm.
and how Tolkien talks about the world of Middle Earth. There's this really deep-rooted sense of identity that is literally your roots
Yeah.
are connected to the land, and us Americans don't really have that. And when we start to have that, it kind of balks at this idea that America is a propositional nation,
Yeah. Yeah.
because people aren't propositional people.
Right. Right. Uh, and that is different. I mean, my family are on both my mother's and my father's side, largely from the British Isles too. So I
Yeah.
have this sort of ancestral connection. And I don't know if you come from India or wherever and move here, I don't know if you would have the same vibes or the same feeling. I mean, certainly there's 1,000-year-old history and structures in India. I would assume some of them might feel that there, but I can't imagine you would be able to, on some level, have that same effect by being in someplace that's not your ancestral homeland.
Yeah. And that is reflected in how these immigrants kind of treat the land. I was in Swinton, which is where the Lotus
Mhm.
Eaters operate, and I was just walking around because when I visit place, I really like to just walk
Yeah.
around, and especially Europe, um, to
Swindon's
feel
not the
those
best
buildings.
example, to be fair, also.
Okay,
uh,
well, I don't
of,
know, but I turned a corner and it was
mm,
just devastated. Just
yeah,
nobody cares. Just trash everywhere and no upkeep. And it's like these people don't really care about this
no,
place, and it really shows. And so when I think about how is England or Britain going to come back from this, they're going to have to rediscover. It's two ways. It needs to be, in my mind, it needs to be a strong man with a
mhm,
centralized authority and a direct claim to British identity, and that identity has to be rooted in Britishness, which is
mhm,
rooted in the Isle
yeah,
and the islands of Britain. And that's
and
the only way to balance
yeah,
that authoritarian structure, is that it has to be like deeply embedded.
yes, and there's all of that kind of idea has been imported from the U.S., where there is a little bit of difference there because yes, there have been people obviously in the Americas for a very long time, but
Hmm. 500
America as a
years or
country,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, about that. I mean, yeah, there's structures, mounds, in West Virginia. Moundsville is named after one that's about 500 years old. It's not 1,000 years old, not 2,000 years old, but it is about 500. Um, and there's just not America is a newer modern nation made up of people who are not from there genetically,
Mhm.
historically. So there it is a little bit different, and it does not work in reverse. You cannot import the American model and make it make any sense in a place where
Mm.
you do have people who have lived here for thousands of years in the same more or less. Some people, they can trace their families back, and they've all lived in the same county for 1,000 years.
Hmm.
That is very different from the United States, just in terms of the time horizons, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. And after World War II, this post World War II consensus really has to do with America and the American project being projected from New York, DC, onto
Hmm.
Europe and then onto
Right.
Asia. And I don't see it doing much good for Europe at this point in history. At this point in history, those ideas, those propositional ideas, which are innovative, and they do it, they were incubated in dialogue with philosophers in Scotland and in France and
Yeah.
in Germany, and so there it is a part of it, it's an outgrowth of the European project of Protestantism and probably
Mhm.
Catholicism too, but it doesn't seem like it's doing those people that good, and the elites don't seem to see it. Maybe
Yeah.
they do. What do you think?
I think perhaps they do. I think it's there's no real plan there for long-term gain in terms of thinking about how this will affect people long term. It's about what can get me money and what makes big number go up, what makes GDP go burr.
Mm-hmm.
And at least in terms of the immigration stuff, that certainly seems to be part of it, to replace the local population, perhaps, as it's maybe a little bit too, maybe it cares a little bit too much about the state of these lands, right? It would
Yeah.
be much perhaps easier to control a population that doesn't have that ancestral tie,
Well,
that
it
doesn't,
that ancestral tie forms a net drag on the GDP, on the infinite
right.
growth.
Right. So. With the SRB stuff, what I looked at there was because we always see numbers like, oh, but look, GDP goes up, so therefore things are good. We've got all this technology and modern medicine and all these things that are excellent. So the quality of conditions for people, and it really was in Britain where I focused a lot of it because that's where I
Mm-hmm.
saw what will, at this point, inevitably affect the rest of the West. It's already starting to in the US, Australia, and Canada. Australia probably will be next, actually, in terms of just the pure demographic variables. Australia, and it's interesting, that just a couple days after I released that sex ratio at birth video, there was a new study published about the sex ratios in Australia being skewed because of female feticide. And that is a major contributing factor to it. But the Trivers-Willard hypothesis, which was sort of the core crux of that video, is that when times are good in a society, more males are born because either there's a perceived or actual excess of resources, so it's less of a cost to gestate a male to birth than it is to because males just in general are less likely to reproduce than are females.
Mm-hmm.
So if
And they
yeah,
experience mortality at very high rates for a
yes,
variety of reasons. Their
right.
behavior and then their susceptibility probably to conditions.
Yeah,
Or
and males are 10% more likely to be stillborn. Males are more likely, in fact, the sex ratio at conception, based on various different studies done, in laboratory conditions, so IVS or intracytoplasmic sperm injection,
mm-hmm.
they find that the rates now, and there's other factors involved there with oxygenation that can skew this. However, they find rates at conception of the male to female skew being somewhere between 117 and 150, meaning 117 to 150 males produced per 100 females.
Okay.
And
So much more males.
yes,
Okay.
there always are more males that are born, generally speaking.
Or
And that's
conceived. Conceived and
conceived, yes.
born?
Yes, the
Okay.
typical skew of the human species is 105 to 5 or to 100. So
Okay.
105 males to 100 females. And that's because men die more. Again, yes, because of adolescent risk-taking behavior, because of war, because of workplace hazards. So you always want slightly more males in a population to reach relative parity. When something is wrong in a society, when resources are more scarce or perceived of as more scarce, then committing resources to gestating a male who is less likely on average to pass on his genes and more likely to die in any variety of fashions. The males will not be born at that same level of around 105, between like 104 and 106. But if you go on any end of that skew
Hmm.
away from 105, something is strange.
Hmm.
And when you look at countries, of course, like China is the obvious example. Even after the cessation of the one child policy, to this day, the sex ratio in China is something like 118. So, and that's at birth. That's not the total population sex ratio, which indicates, of course, that they are still committing female infanticide and female feticide.
Just to grok what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
whenever you mention the number in the SRB or sex ratio at birth,
Mhm.
you're always talking about the male number because sometimes you just
Yes.
truncate it. So it's
Yeah.
it's 118. If you say 118, you mean 118 to
118 to
100.
100. Yeah. The female, expect the female number to always be 100.
Okay.
So you're looking at
Yeah.
anything around that. And then
Okay.
in African countries, now there's a genetic component to this, but in many African countries, they have SRBs not only under 105, but under 100 in some instances. So there's more females being born.
Yeah.
that in part is because a lot of African countries have very poor conditions. And of course, that means gestating a male is more difficult. There's fewer resources, so you will have more females. There's also there's an allele. It's a RS144. I keep having to bring it up and then forgetting about it. Well, because it's a long series of numbers.
An allele is a genetic instruction code.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. It's not
RS1.
necessarily a mutation. It's just a part of these people's makeup.
Yeah. And it's in this case, it's sort of like, is it present or not? It's RS144724107. And they only identified this last year, scientists did. And if you have this gene, then you have a 19% greater likelihood of having a daughter than a son, just in general. And when there was genome testing on the only place that it's been studied is actually in the British Isles. And only 20%, I think, yeah, 20% of people with that they sampled, so again, largely white British people, have this allele. So they are already predisposed to have more sons than they are daughters. And yet, when I went and looked at the actual sex ratio of the United Kingdom, of England and Wales specifically, it's under 105, and has been dropping significantly. It is also in the US among white Americans, and it is in Australia among white Australians, and it is in Canada among white Canadians. And it has been since about the 1970s.
Europeans are perceiving some sort of threat or bottleneck.
That's part of the hypothesis. Trivers-Willard, one was a sociologist, and then one was a computer scientist. I think actually one of them passed away, but a computer scientist and a sociologist came up with this theory in the 70s. And yeah, it's a stress hypothesis. So if a population feels stressed in some way, whether or not it's something that you can measure, it's a vibe or what have you, a feeling of civilizational anxiety, then that population will start having more daughters and will have fewer sons. Now, there's a confound variable here, which is advanced maternal age. Obviously, women have started having children older and older in life.
Yeah.
And the longer that women wait to have children, their likelihood of having a son goes down. So that's a confound in it.
Successfully having a son or even conceiving a son?
Well, it's difficult to say because oftentimes they don't do sex testing.
Because the male is what
at birth
chooses the sex, right?
Right. Yes. That's in the sperm cell. And so, yeah, again, any sperm cell selected at random is more likely to result in the production of a male than a female. That's just, human biology.
Bros before hoes, man.
Yeah,
Bros
apparently.
before hoes, yeah.
However, men, again, die at such higher rates. That's why it exists that way. So it's actually harder to be a man from the moment of conception. You already have almost everything going, or a lot of different factors going against you.
A hard man is good to find.
And have you heard that quote about the good times create weak men create bad times create strong men? That's the Trivers-Willard hypothesis, just put in a more colloquial way.
Yeah.
And so you'll have fewer males when times are tough, but they will be, this is the hypothesis part of it, genetically fitter because they were allowed to go ahead with that. The pregnancy was allowed to go forward, even though resources are more scarce and times are more unstable. And you can actually, one of the most interesting parts about it, that why we know that this is true and not entirely just hypothetical, and is that you can witness it occur directly after tragic events. So after 9/11, about 6 to 9 months after 9/11, the sex ratio in the state of New York drops. There's fewer males born. Anytime that there is a major earthquake or natural disaster, go check the sex ratios at birth 6 to 9 months later, and you will see that there are fewer males.
So this, speaking evolution, when discussing this broad range of topics under evolutionary psychology or evolutionary biology, I think one of the biggest difficulties for people to really understand it and properly understand it is that we are hardwired, we're coded to project will onto things. We're always making narratives. There's always an intentional actor there. And whenever we try to stray too far from that in the justice system and try to do away with free will, our entire system of justice falls apart because it's all based on this assumption that people choose to do things. But when we talk about evolution and these evolutionary mechanisms, even on the psychological level, they're not necessarily intentional. but
No,
our brains always are trying to project that. So we have to be really kind of careful to understand
sure.
nobody's choosing to have fewer males. There's a
Right.
environmental stimulus that's causing the urine that's stored in the balls to change
Right.
viscosity or whatever, right?
Right.
It's like it's
Exactly.
some
Yeah.
weird thing that's going on. So can you help me understand like why what is happening in the male's environment to want to or to be less likely to inseminate females or inseminate males? Like how is that mechanism? I guess we don't know. It's just a hypothesis. These things kind of always have to stay in the realm of hypotheses.
This
Even
one's got some pretty robust evidence. Again,
okay.
so in a year when this has been studied in Finland with longitudinal data going back to the 1800s. Or no,
Oh,
1700s actually. I think on no, was it the Finland one? Yeah, I think so. Where they found that they basically just looked at, was it 1 degree hotter or colder that year, and 1 degree 1 degree colder per year results in an increased production of males.
okay.
Radiation throws a real spanner in it, so because that can also cause the opposite, but that's because it's mutation.
Okay.
Pollutants also kind of strange. But so, for example, when China's industrial sector started kicking up in the Japanese Goto Islands, which are just about due south of the Korean Peninsula, they started to find that over time, as there's more pollutants that are flooding in and landing up in Goto,
Mhm.
that the number of males started to decrease just because of pollutants in the air that no one could see, but
Mhm.
were detectable physiologically. Yeah, there's no choice that enters into this.
Yeah.
It's all just these biological calculus that happens autonomically. And it
Yeah.
makes sense because you're talking about in harsh evolutionary conditions, if you need to pass on your genes, and that's the whole point of life, if you want to put one to it, is to propagate and pass on your genes. And
Mhm.
if that's what your body is trying to do, as all bodies are trying to do, well, then you don't want to waste resources to produce a male, who is less likely to be able to continue to replicate the genes than it is to invest those resources in a female. Now, when
Mhm.
you've got plenty of resources and you can roll the dice again, have more children, and you don't have to worry about not being able to take care of them or, any of these other stressors, and you've got access to the resources, then males won't be as likely to be cold in utero. But
Mhm.
that's a reason why a lot of males are lost in the womb, is because of this just biological calculus.
Mhm.
Now,
So
there is human
yeah.
involvement in this, and that's the female feticide stuff that some cultures participate in. But the the biological part, that's outside of anyone's hands besides God's.
Could you do a hypothesization of why female infanticide or feticide occurs? And is it always skewed female? Like, what is the
In every
cultural mechanism for that?
It's different in different cultures,
Okay.
and it really does depend because, of course, there's in China again, they cessation of one child policy it didn't really matter. They're still doing it. Look at sex at birth ratios in China today; they're still skewed, and a lot of
What
times
are
it's
they like?
because
Really
I think
obviously skewed,
118,
like 120,
117.
18. Okay, so it's a pretty big.
Yeah. Or is that India's is also very high. Actually, I can just find it real quick. Uh, Oral and data sex ratio at birth, and let's see, China. It's 110 now. Where was it? It used to be a lot higher though. It has gone down a lot if I go to the graph here. Yeah,
Hmm.
it was 117 in 2006. So
Hmm.
it, yeah,
That's a pretty big
even
change. 20 years, I guess, is pretty adaptive.
yes, yeah, it does change. Well, again, if it's hotter or colder in a single year can change this. It's
Wow.
a it's a fascinating sort of thermometer to measure the
Yeah.
health of a human species, of any human civilization culture at any given
Okay.
point in time. And again, because we have baptismal records that go back centuries, you're able to track this little metric going back centuries. And you can line them up pretty much one to one. Wars are a little bit strange because wars, of course, kill a lot of men.
Yeah.
Usually, very early on in a war, there will be more males born. And there's a hypothesis that is, oh, we need to make more men because they are necessary, even though things are difficult. In the middle of a war, SRB goes down a lot. And the longer it goes down, or the longer the war continues, the longer it stays depressed. And then near the end of a war, the baby boom, the number of males born goes back up and often goes very high near the end and
Hmm.
at the end of a war. Also, economic crises can be measured to do this. So, During the Great Depression, you have fewer males born. And it's just consistently, you can look at anything. The reason I got interested in this is I was reading this doctor from Malta published a bunch of Star Trek fan fictions in a medical journal that he wrote.
Hmm.
It was very bizarre, but his actually this is his actual area of research, and I got interested in it just because I saw he wrote an article where the title was just "Did the sex ratio at birth skew in the United States following the death of Elvis Presley?" And I thought why would anyone ever ask a question like that? But it turns out he actually had a good rationale to ask that because it's possible that it did. Because, for example, the Japanese sex ratio at birth increased after Japan won the World Cup.
Oh, okay.
That's the kind of level of stuff that can affect this. Little things that
Huh.
you would never. How could
Yeah.
that possibly have an effect on the biology at a societal level where you can measure it? But it
Yeah.
does.
I wonder
Just and
what
it's vibes.
Michael Jackson's death
Yeah,
instigated.
it could be anything. I think he did. I don't know if he did the Queen or anything like that. But it would be interesting
Okay.
to see if some celebrity
Yeah.
deaths did affect it.
And then
I
you
just
could
have,
actually reverse engineer the meaning of any given passing of these figures.
true. Yeah,
In some way, I mean, I don't know. You're pretty dicey ground. So
yeah,
if it is the case that Europeans who have spread across the world and who have experienced massive amounts of material gain are now perceiving some threat, what can you extrapolate either more or less confidently on what this is totally loaded language, and I hope people that are listening understand that I'm not being racialist, but the white race is experiencing something. Europeans are experiencing something on a global level, even though we have so much material prosperity, more than any
right.
time in recorded history, at least.
I mean, the only race component of it is that, like I said, particularly white British people don't have this one gene for the most part.
Okay.
Only 80% or 80% don't have the gene, and
The gene
that was
that
a
predisposes you to have more females.
yes, they don't have
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
And so that's the only study that's been done on it. It was conducted late last year, so it's only been about a year since it was well published at least. However, I hope they do some more studies on it. It's from genome data, obviously, because my
Hmm.
hypothesis very much is that people of African ancestry do have that gene because for whatever reason, it doesn't now. African Americans SRBs are higher than they are in Africa, but they're still very low, and they're low wherever people of African heritage move to in the world. And
Hmm.
they're particularly low in like Scandinavian countries, and I think that again has to do with that cold part of it. That's being
Oh,
perceived of as a bad time because you're not as adapted to cold environments. So if
yeah.
you're living in Norway and you are of, you know, area historically closer to the equator, then that's going to represent bad times in a way, even if you're living in luxury.
Hmm.
And the female feticide thing skews it because every bit of evidence indicates that people from India and China, South Korea, they don't do it as much anymore than they as much as they used to. Then there's also places like Benin where it's part of their, the practice of voodoo even. It still happens. And even if it's not being done in a totally ritualistic way, these are cultural norms where you have to have a son first.
Hmm.
Or otherwise like your name doesn't get passed on in terms of there's different ways different cultures approach the sex of the first child. But in many, many cultures, it's seen as important to have a son first because it
Yeah.
secures your line as a
Yeah.
man and as the family. Now you've got the son. I mean, all the stories, of course, of King Henry trying very desperately to have one, and that's obvious,
Yeah.
monarchical reasons. But it's the same sort of mindset even within individual families. So you do have cultures today that continue to practice it, China and India being amongst them. Pakistan's SRB is low because it's Pakistan, uh, even though you'd think they'd be doing what all their neighbors are doing, and it is elevated in some
Hmm.
instances. But when Pakistanis move abroad, their SRB remains low as well. And the only answer that I could come to explain that one is consanguinity.
Yeah.
So I think that's a
Inbreeding.
problem there. Yeah,
Yeah.
just a guess. However, and going back to the more general question, something I don't know if I relate it to like white people feel that something's wrong with them inherently. It's that I think just people in the West, citizens, people who've lived here for any period of time, or in Western countries. And here, I mean, the United States, Canada,
Okay.
Australia, the UK. That's because those are the countries I focused on. Being an English speaker and having lived for a long time in two of them.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily that it's specifically bad for whites, but it does appear it's affecting them the most, and they are the native peoples of those countries. The
Hmm.
U.S. And Australia, Canada, obviously not as native, but in terms of the majority of the country and have been for a long time. Yeah.
Hmm.
Something is appears to be not going great for those people for their sex ratios at birth to be declining. Again, you have to remember the increasing maternal age.
Hmm.
Hormonal birth control, excuse me, doesn't appear to affect it. A study in Finland on it also didn't find that. Was that Finland? Sorry, I'm trying to think of these all off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
there was a study that went, yeah, that was the same Finnish one that went back several hundred years. And they found that the introduction of hormonal birth control, they were pretty sure didn't have anything to do with it. But increasing maternal age does.
Yeah. Well, with that interpretive tool, you could go into just studying America. You could just study all these different demographics
Hmm.
and where they're living. You could go by religions, wonder like Mormons feel particularly safe right now or under threat right now.
Right.
And, you could go through the different stratum just to gauge a biologically perceived threat or difficult time, right?
Yeah, that's why. Well, I was fascinated to find it because you can pretty much do that. You can even do it county by county, which I did for the UK.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
I went, I went and looked at the counties that had the lowest SRBs and the highest SRBs, and I found the one with the highest sex ratio at birth is the City of London, the square mile. So right in the center, one of the, if not the most expensive place to live in the country.
Hmm.
However, it's I think like 46% white British. It's very expensive, wealthy foreigners, or at least
Mm.
I'm guessing that's who lives there. Not a lot of children were born there in the data period with the last census, so 2022. However, their sex ratio at birth during the last census was 150, so 150 males born to 100 girls.
Whoa.
Yeah, that number, by the way, anything above about 108, 109, that's not normal. That's beyond the normal human range, I would say.
150 sounds like something's really off in the
150
data,
is
right?
150 is killing female it's female not infanticide but feticide.
Feticide. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, there's no way to get around that. Now, there's not a whole bunch of children, so those data are way more easily
Yeah.
infected because they're such a small
Yeah.
sample. But I went and looked at the counties with the lowest sex ratios, and it's Lewis, Denbighshire, and Bolsover. And I found that all of those are predominantly white and British. And however, the SRB got lower the fewer white British people there were. By like a percentage point by percentage point by percentage point seemed to align almost identically with the number of the percentage of white British population in the county.
Hmm.
The A couple years ago, speaking of the Lotus Eaters guys, Callum, who used to work at Lotus Eaters, Britannica on YouTube, a few years ago he did a video where he went to the most British place in England, and I remember seeing that video. It was very interesting. He also went to the least British place in England, kind of show you the dichotomy
Hmm.
there. And I looked up their sex ratios at birth. The most British part of England has an SRB of 98, meaning that there's more females being born there than males, which is, in terms of country level data, that is lower than Afghanistan or the Congo in 1950, if we're talking about relative conditions.
Yeah, and so that expresses a stressor.
Again, increasing maternal age, there are other factors, but it looks
Yeah.
like something is very wrong in these
Huh.
very white and British places in
Yeah.
England and Wales.
Yeah. Well, what do you do with this? Where do you go? Where's your imagination go with it? Because I know
Yeah.
you're a very principled individual. You stick to the data. You try to keep things on the
Thank you. Try to be.
on the
But
tracks, right? But this is a really powerful idea for you. It kind of lit you up. Even like you've put it, like you've tattooed it to your wall. If anybody's
yeah,
watching, it's like right
to
there.
be,
It's like,
to be
bam.
fair, I do that at the end for every video, and I haven't wiped it
Okay.
off to. I'm about
Oh,
to talk
okay.
about terrorism data next. That'll be real fun. Very popular
Oh,
on YouTube, I'm sure. But
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll see how I can try to get around it. But well, yeah, I fell into this and it was crazy. I felt like I'd lost my mind a little bit that I was seeing these numbers, and even I was working a little bit with AI just to help me like organize the data. Can you
Yeah.
double check this, make sure with that kind of stuff? And it started to say sanity check. I heard a little sanity check, calm down. And I wasn't typing anything emotional into it. I just used it as a work assistant. And it started to ask me if I needed a sanity check because, of course, it's looking at the same data I'm looking at.
Hmm.
So, and I think it's
How,
possible not to come to the
what's the
same
mechanism
conclusion.
for it to be triggered by that? Why would that be insane? Or
Uh, because it indicates that again something is very wrong in a way that cannot that it be measured by GDP going up, by increasing,
okay.
technology and access to medicine and all this stuff that is making things very bad, particularly for white people in the West. And
Yeah.
despite the fact that they also have this gene that makes them even more likely to have sons than other groups,
Hmm.
and yet they're not.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that's why even the AI started to be like, this is a bit just making sure you're okay, which I'm sure that they've got built into their back end somewhere of if someone starts, except for in this case, I wasn't saying anything for the most part. I was just putting in studies
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and data sets, and it still started to do that. So
Hmm.
I don't trust any of this AI crap, so I don't probably means nothing. But I did think that
Yeah.
was interesting a little
Yeah.
bit.
So something is wrong
It appears to be.
on an existential level, like evolutionary number. These birth rate numbers is like the most literal way in which you can use the word existential threat or existential. This
Yeah.
is existential. Where do you allow yourself to go with that? Like, what is it in our culture? What is it in the ideology of the West? And I would be interested to compare that to a place like Russia. It's still rather Caucasian, but not of the Western
Wait, what
tact.
is theirs? I remember Russia's. It didn't stick out as particularly weird, did it? No, it's 1056, which is a little on the high end, but completely normal.
They're in the middle of
Uh,
a war right now too.
it- right. Ukraine's has changed a lot, but Russia's actually hasn't, which
Huh.
so that probably also says something. Um,
About
it,
their
it looks like
certainty of the outcome of the war. They're not particularly threatened by it.
the fact that Ukraine's SRB has been affected by this, but Russia's hasn't, would be indicative of perhaps that. Again, if winning the Rugby World Cup can change this,
Yeah.
uh, you know, what kind of vibes, feelings. COVID was very strange with it because what I basically think I think I explained or figured out it's a guess though because it at first the sex ratio dropped so and by at first I mean 6 to 9 months after COVID. So at first you see a little dip because you need to obviously wait that long for gestation to occur. Um,
Hmm.
so at first it dropped, but then pretty much everywhere by about 3, 4, 5, 6 months, again, adding that on to 6 to 9 extent. So then, 3, 4, 5 months after that, it went up and it went up quite a lot. Again, the countries that I looked at were the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. And I think that I found that in both the US and the UK. I'm pretty sure those were the two countries. And that actually indicates that maybe people were really comfortable because they weren't working.
Hmm.
They were staying at
Oh,
home
you got
and they
those
did, and they
government
weren't,
checks, you know?
but you didn't have to go to work and you weren't afraid of the virus at that point because everyone, whatever they were still doing and whatever they said on
Yeah.
a biological level,
Yeah.
people were no longer afraid.
Yeah.
Or at least
Oh, yeah.
conclusions you can draw from it, right?
We're in the footnotes, which is the weeds for
Yeah.
nerds. But have you come across any definitive data on the impact of the novel coronavirus medicine that they call
No,
a
not on this.
vaccine? If that's impacted birth rates at all, if it is indeed like some sort of sterilization
I
thing.
mean, I have kind of avoided looking at that because it's a very depressing idea, and also because there's no way I could make a video on it. I
Oh,
mean, it might
yeah.
be something I'd be interested in pursuing myself, but I've not because that's just
Okay. All right.
that is a complete. wait, even to this day, which is also telling. It's not that you get banned anymore for doing it, for talking
Yeah.
about COVID. Now they just basically hide the video,
Yeah.
and
Freedom
and
of reach. Yeah.
they actually don't even need to, because there's been psychological research on this as well. People, and I'll, it's the name of an article. I always forget if it was in the Atlantic or the New York Times or what, but the title of it was, "We will forget much of the pandemic, and that's a good thing." And it was talking about neuroscience research and how when you have a very stressful and painful memory, obviously you want to suppress it. So
Yeah.
for this same reason that people with PTSD often forget things, in a way you have a kind of cultural post-traumatic stress disorder going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
People do so if they just see COVID, they see that a picture even of the stupid little virus, mock-up, it makes them want to avoid that material because it's stressful and it reminds them of a really unpleasant time. But again, about the unpleasantness, why did the SRB go up about 6 months into lockdown unless people weren't afraid? They were
Hmm.
annoyed. Life sucked. There was a lot of things that were annoying, but
Yeah.
they weren't afraid.
Hmm.
Or at least that's a hypothesis. It's something
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could suspect was why, because I didn't understand why would that have happened. I thought the whole world was freaked out, but SRB went up.
I can't help from violating neutrality on this topic and hypothesize that the cultural engineering that has been decidedly anti-white, that has been promulgated by all major institutions, we'll just call it
Yep.
the cathedral, media, academia, and it's reinforced. If you once you go woke, you can't go unwoke. And by woke, I don't mean like you are yourself woke, but once you start seeing the critical race consciousness, you just see it all the time. You start
Right.
to see the ratios of races represented in commercials. You're like,
You have
why
to
is the white
deconstruct
guy
everything.
always the stupid? Why is the white guy always the
Yeah.
stupid guy? Why is the black female for some reason the most important
Right.
over and over and over again? So there's this messaging that's being flashed that is targeted and designed to target white Europeans across
Hmm.
wherever they are, and
Right.
whatever socioeconomic status that you are in the wrong somehow.
Yeah.
And
The
then
worst thing you can be. Yeah. A white man in
yeah,
the media. Yeah.
and so and not only that, but I think that attendant to that negative identity association with whiteness, there's been a stripping down of what it means to be European.
Hmm.
We really, I think, on a cultural level, we are rapidly losing our identity and our ability to be proud of our identity or
Oh yeah.
to reinforce our identity, and that, of course, would reflect itself in how we propagate our identity. Like, there's antinatalism among
Yeah.
hyper progressive people, because why would you bring another child into this world, and
Yes.
why,
Right.
why
Right.
would you burden the world with more of your kind? Um, but that still would be reflected on a biological level that we are under threat, like
It
existential threat.
Now that, yeah, that I didn't, I think I had a thought similar to that because I was thinking, yeah, how does their aversion to having children? Because at some point that's going to become statistically significant.
Yeah,
And so if they're not, like, if we were just to say that they're having children at such a rate that it's not able to affect the already declining white SRB, but they're not having enough children to significantly affect it. However,
yeah.
it would be interesting, and I didn't look at this because I highly doubt it's been conducted. But if you could look at the political orientations of parents and the sex ratios, or you could at least do it on a county
Wow.
level, you could. If this is a really
Yeah,
blue city, say this really blue
yeah,
city, City of London, again, highest SRB in the country, by the way. Um,
yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, London in general has a
You
high
could probably
SRB,
map that.
but
I know that heat map that goes around that I use all the time, and I know
yeah,
there's
the weights. Yeah,
yeah, the
weights
weights of
2014. Yeah.
I know you can interpret it in different ways about how far your empathy can spread, rather
Right.
than how much
Mhm.
empathy you have for the out group as opposed to the in group. But that would probably reflect itself in the sex ratio at birth
Yeah.
if you
Well,
truly had those beliefs.
the thing is that what I looked at in the video and focused on was on the SRBs of immigrants to these countries,
Yeah,
because their sex ratios are very high typically, and it's not all from Asia's the worst offenders because they are the ones who most commonly practice sex selective abortions. Muslims also do it culturally. it's not only limited to them, to be fair. Georgia had, particularly in the 90s, a incredibly high SRB that could only have been due to Georgia and Armenia had incredibly high SRBs that could have only been due to female feticide or infanticide.
Hmm.
Again, once you get a number,
Is
if it's over
Georgia
10, Christian.
Muslim? Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that's a Cold War thing or
Yeah.
Cold War thing that happened there or what it was. But
Yeah.
for some reason, these predominantly Christian countries in Europe, after the end of the Cold War, didn't have a lot of daughters for a long time, and it's still tapering off in those
I
places.
wonder if there's because culture is closer to intentionality than is evolution, but it's
Yes.
still a manifest of subconscious
Yeah.
drives and stuff. So I wonder
Right.
what is the cultural factor that locks in fetal infant selection or
Wait,
deselection, I guess.
it might not even happen consciously to a certain extent, in that if a woman finds out that she is, with the sex, so that usually has to happen pretty late. I think by the time you can determine the baby's sex, that's second trimester, I think.
Yeah, I haven't
It's
had a
pretty,
baby, so I
yeah,
can't
I
remember.
think it's, you have to wait quite a few weeks for that. But I think, I mean, in America, or at least in some places, and probably in quite a few other countries, you probably can still get an abortion at that point. You go to your doctor's appointment and you find out it's a boy, or whatever. In the case of liberals, I would imagine that might be a deciding factor for them, even if they didn't consciously think it.
Yeah,
Of actually, maybe right now isn't a good time.
yeah, yeah. It's
You know
so
what I mean?
weird. Well, I mean, abortion itself is a weird
Yeah.
cultural phenomenon that's biblical in its
Mm.
age. That's one of the when you go through Genesis, God is punishing or reacting negatively to human behavior, and child
Yeah.
infanticide is like
Yeah.
pretty close to like no,
Yeah.
that's the wrong way to go, and I'm
Yes.
not allowing you guys to go that direction.
Yeah. That's a big no-no. Yeah.
Yeah. But I so how do you extrapolate this? Like or
Right.
what would be what would be the signal that you could derive for political ends,
Right.
pro or
I
con, you know.
what I think why I want people to know about this actually
Yeah,
more
why
than
do you want
anything is
people to know about it?
I think it has political utility because again, it cuts through. Now, it's not a perfect instrument as nothing is, but this
Yeah. Hmm.
cuts through BS like GDP. This cuts through
Okay.
all of the but living in a multicultural society is great for everybody because we get
Yeah.
all this food or whatever, the typical kind of boring talking points that you get about why immigration is so great for everybody. And here's the
Yeah.
thing, it's not only that it's not good for the native population, it permanently messes, or at least for 4 generations. It takes 4 generations for immigrants from India to Canada, which was the exact country I looked at it in, for their SRBs to normalize to the Canadian average. 4 generations. All four of your grandparents must have been born in Canada for your sex ratio to be around the same as the average Canadian if you are of Indian heritage.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, part of the other thing that Trivers-Willard talks about is this idea of fragile males, the males who are born in times of plenty, the weak men in the idiom of, hard times create strong men, etc. And they're called fragile males because, again, these are males that are just biologically predicted to be less likely to reproduce than the
Hmm.
men who are not cold during times of where resources are scarce. But
Hmm.
in times of plenty, well, we don't have to worry about it as much. So these excess males, of which one could make the argument that most of the boomer generation are fragile excess males, they're males who are less likely, just biologically calculated, to be able to reproduce. What do men do if they can't find a female partner? Much more likely to commit crimes is a big one of
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
And if
Invent
these men have other, yeah,
neoconservatism and neoliberalism, maybe? I
that
don't know.
too. But if it's a fragile male, some biological calculus has said that this boy, it would not be worth it to spend resources on gestating this male. Those are the males that are born in times of plenty. And for
Hmm.
immigrants, you see a rise in their sex ratios for the most part, no matter what, because the grass is always greener. But also, if you're moving from India to America, things are better, right?
Hmm.
Just ambiently.
Yeah.
So even if they weren't doing the female feticide, which they are, their sex ratios go up anyway because of relative conditions.
Yeah.
And in doing so, in part, amongst many other factors, that decreases the conditions in the country they've moved to, one contributing factor, which causes the native SRBs to decline. So you've got these literally countervailing forces that are pushing against each other.
Yeah.
But it means their sons will be just, again, mathematically less likely to be able to get married and have children of their own. And I don't know, for a lot of these cultures, I think even that might dissuade some of them a little bit.
Hmm.
Maybe that would be, I guess that's the argument as to why you might want to, how you could possibly try to sell it to immigrants. But I think they're already sold on just the benefits of living in the West, or else they wouldn't have come.
You're making me think of
Politically,
Kamala. Don't
yeah,
come.
yeah,
Don't
don't come.
come.
Oh, I'm gonna come. I love that meme. It's not good for anybody. And again, it's not affected by my GDP or, yeah, but I can go order Indian food and Chinese food and it's great.
Yeah.
And look at all these things that modernity gives us.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to, I think it's a good indicator point that cuts through all the BS essentially. If things are as good as you say they are,
Yeah.
why is the white sex ratio dropping? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's complicated to explain all the, basal things you need to know about like what the normal ratio is and why
Yeah.
it changes and oh, and it
Well,
changes in this specific time, so we actually know that this is a real thing. Um,
what I'm
requires a
running
lot of
against is
setup.
that even if you explain it as bad, there's a presupposition that more white people is a good thing or not a good thing, right? When you're talking about it politically, like why care about
Right.
the hard times for white people? And adversely, if white people are going through a bottleneck, if you are a radical strain of pro-white, you could say, well, actually, that's a good thing. We're gonna cull the weak guys. We're gonna concentrate, and then we're gonna have like a white
I
Reich or
actually,
whatever, you know?
yeah, I thought about that argument, about it as well, about that one in particular of the, this will, weed out the weak and only the strong will remain or whatever. I thought about
Yeah.
that being a potential interpretation of this. Um, I mean, the people on the left who are so crazy that so many of them will just tell you they want whites to die out. So, I mean, this would be great information for them, I suppose, because of just our constant
They really do
destruction of
believe
everything.
that. And
Yes,
they
yes,
either believe that or they don't disagree with that.
pretty much. I mean, at
That's
this
how
point,
they've painted themselves.
at this point, it's very rare to run into one who they used to lie, or at least maybe, I don't know, maybe the opinion changed. But they used to say, no, no, we don't hate white people. We just want equality for everybody, and we need to help these people who've been disenfranchised. No, we absolutely don't hate white people. And it's absurd that you would accuse us of that. That's,
Yeah.
horrific. And that changed over in the course of a decade from that being the dominant narrative to
Yeah.
it being no, yes, actually, we do hate white people. We do want you to die out, and we think all of this is a good thing. I said it in my video almost exactly. I said, if I mean those people finding out about this, they'd be ecstatic, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
even think they'd hide it at this point that they would be
Yeah.
ecstatic.
Oh,
What
that
we can do with it is, again, my best use case for it is it cuts through BS. And it shows you that living in modernity is causing bad times in some way that is untouchable. It's just biological. It's
yeah.
it's pure, no one's
Yeah.
making any decisions
Okay.
here at all. It's all hands off.
Yeah.
Well, decisions are
Okay.
happening to society, but
Yeah.
it's just people's bodies reacting to stimuli. And something about the world,
Okay.
something about the West is making white people's bodies react negatively as if they are in conditions that are, again, in some way equivalent to Afghanistan or the Congo in 1950, in the case
Hmm.
of England and Wales.
Okay. All right.
So,
Yeah, no, it's incontrovertible, and that is really refreshing to understand why it's such a powerful tool, or because it comes from the environment, and
yeah,
it's reflecting an existential reality that the body's perceiving,
yeah.
that the bodies are perceiving. So it's just kind of clear.
Can't be affected by propaganda. As much as you tell people it's so great, well, then what's happening?
Yeah.
If it is so great to live in a modern city, then why are sex ratios at birth amongst whites so low in cities all across the world and in the West? In America, look at a city, you will find and if you're able to zoom in on the white portion of the population, you will find that they have a low SRB comparative to rural areas, rural areas,
Rural areas.
the rural drawer. Yeah, just a bit of a tongue twister.
Well, so to kind of get a little bit our hands dirty a little bit into contemporary political positioning, it would seem that I feel like this is just the wrong way to put it, but I kind of want to get your take on current political discourse and maybe using this as a bridge. But it seems to be the case that there is something inherent in liberalism, and which is the foundation of modernity as it's political ideology.
Hmm.
There's something in it that is not good for the West. And
Right.
it needs to be retooled. And a lot of the conversations that are happening that I find most interesting are from the right trying to retool liberalism. And the smartest
Yeah.
among the people that I speak to are rather reluctant illiberals. They actually
Hmm.
see and prize certain aspects of liberalism,
Yeah.
freedom of conscience, freedom of trade, freedom of speech, like those core liberal principles, to be covetous, but they themselves are eroding what allowed them
Yeah.
to be so great. They
Yes.
erode our connection with tradition. They erode our connection with our basic identity and the specter of Nazism that persists to this day,
Sure.
where the left was calling everybody to the right of them, including the centrist Nazis. Now the centrists are calling everybody to the right of them Nazis. Nazism is a particular voracious, you can even say toxic or self-defeating form of trying to recapture racial identity and trying to, in a modern way, institute a culture that's for itself, by itself, and unified in the project of preserving and pronouncing its will in the world.
Hmm.
And the right is constantly thwarted by accusations of Nazism because they are trying to deal with the same things. Like there is
Sure.
these cultural independent uniquenesses, and some of them are more liberal than others, but liberalism isn't their defining characteristic.
Yeah.
Liberalism is not the defining characteristic of, let's just say, the British people as a people. It's something
Right.
that they express themselves. So please riff on that.
Well, in terms of, I guess the eugenics sort of question or something that might come out of this, or that it would sound associated with, I guess, somewhat inherently. So I did consider that, and therefore the usefulness of this measurement. Someone probably smarter than me will have to figure out how to use it or retool it. The SRB thing leading into this,
Mm-hmm.
but I think at some point, though, I don't know about the whole association with fascism and or that the left has made, and now even centers make quite commonly. At some point, though, I mean, if it becomes, first of all, what they accuse people of, it has nothing to do with fascism whatsoever or Nazism whatsoever. It's just it is just a word. It's just a slur for anyone who thinks in a certain way that's different from them. That's unallowed for. So
Yeah.
I mean, I just think don't. I mean, obviously, it's been going on this way for a long time. If you've been in it, you cannot care if people call you a Nazi or a fascist because it doesn't mean anything. And by the way, I just read a study that was published last month, yesterday, that found that right-wing authoritarianism, the thing that's supposed to be so terrifying, was not related to an. It was related to when considering a war, whether or not it's just to use inhumane tactics targeting civilians and things like that. That was not. Believing in restrictions on war was associated with right-wing authoritarianism. It
Mm-hmm.
was not associated with left-wing authoritarianism, which was associated with using any means necessary in war.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a difference between right and left-wing
Well,
authoritarianism.
yeah. There is a dehumanization at
Yeah.
the heart of humanitarianism, which is
Hmm.
really tricksy because you want
Yeah.
to be a human, you believe in universal rights, and therefore you will do anything that's necessary to impose those universal rights
Yeah.
on it, starting with like your neighbor. You will go to total war much quicker than if
Yeah.
you have a more a pre-liberal point of view of competing states and competing identities.
That's the Whig view of history. Progressive March is that everyone else is keeping us down from essentially obtaining utopia. So of course you get quite furious about that person because it's sort of like I guess if you had to believe that until every single person on earth is Muslim, for example, that then or whatever religion, whatever faith you believe in, I suppose,
Yeah,
until
yeah,
every single last person is converted, and it's only once that's achieved that then we can all go to heaven and live in peace. Well, then that explains why they need to impress liberalism on, sorry, very cool. In order for the liberal utopia to be achieved, which they do seem to believe in, at least that's the progressive march, it's always going to get better. You know, the more liberal we make things, the better things will get. And
yeah.
we are only being held back from Star Trek world because of those damn conservatives. At some point, does that not also become an existential threat? That you are being held back from, unlocking the secrets of all medicine and science and letting us live forever in this scientific utopic future. And the conservatives are just so backwards they won't let you do that because they won't accept, whatever they think. But
Yeah,
I think
well,
even
the liberal
liberals think this
project to
way.
maximize liberty in and of
Yes.
itself it doesn't necessarily lead to good times.
No.
Maximizing liberty in and of itself is not the holy grail of
But because it's
society.
yeah, and they think it's good for everyone. And as long as people don't believe in liberty, that's an effect, an attack on your liberty, I suppose, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Well, yeah, injustice
Yeah.
anywhere. This is another trope of theirs. Injustice
Right.
anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Right.
And so how they retool it, they accept religion as long as it's what preempts religion is liberalism. Like
Right.
you can believe and do anything as long as you believe first and foremost that everybody else can believe and do anything.
Yeah.
And that is a tremendously powerful ideology if you want to rule the world. And
Yep.
that's a cosmopolitan and an empire frame of mind.
Yes.
But it doesn't translate to good times for these tiny little communities. And that's what is particularly striking about Europe, about Britain, is that they are actually suffering by trying to achieve this post-ethnic, post-religious order. Like stronger ethnicities, stronger religions come in and propose a bottleneck. But how do you reverse that? How do you get the liberal to
Yeah.
understand that actually my liberalism hinges on an authority structure that is so diffuse and disapparated through all these bureaucratic processes that there is no
Mhm.
authority. So I get maximum freedom, but that's not the only thing that's the
That
only game in
matters.
town.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. At this point, too, I'm particularly looking again at this, like some of this terrorism stuff. I just wanted to figure out who actually does more terrorisms, right?
Hmm.
That was my question there,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons, following what happened with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
So who actually does it? Now you go to because also people were all trying to answer that question after that happened. Was, oh, but look, the ADL or whatever, I think it was the ADL, wasn't it? Says, no, that the right are the ones who commit more crimes because they count, or do more crimes because they count prison violence as right wing and things like that.
Yeah.
So went out to actually find the answer to that.
Yeah.
And
Who commits more terrorisms?
in terms of,
Politically speaking, or on some sort of vector, ideological vector.
there's
Muslims,
yeah.
Christians, left, right? Is that what your question
Yeah.
is?
And
Yeah.
there's several massive global databases on it that I've been looking at. There's the Purist database, which is persons of interest something, and then the global terrorism database. And those
And these are
have,
trustworthy and
yeah, I mean,
complete.
it's as official as it gets, and they
Okay.
have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of entries in them. Purist
Okay.
database is just for the U.S., and the GDT is again global. So look at that. Uh, Going through those massive amounts of data. And it does appear that, well, first of all, Muslims beat everyone out of the ballpark by it doesn't matter what years I restrict it to, if I restrict it to just the last 3 years, just the last 5 years, because
Yeah.
you got to be careful about that 9/11 thing, and stuff like that. Big events
Yeah.
that have a ton of casualties all at once will skew the reports because these reports are report on casualties and wounded. So Islam beats everyone out of the water. Then if you look at the skew, there is more, and consistently to this day, more right-wing terrorist attacks. However, what those data also have in them is foiled plots. So
Hmm.
attacks that never actually happen. And when you add those in, the left plans far more terrorist activity and it gets foiled more.
Hmm.
So in terms of the planning stage, more of it's left wing. In terms
Yeah.
of the fulfillment
Execution.
stage,
Yeah.
and yes, quite literally the
And that
execution
could
of it,
be,
then it's more right
I
wing.
could give two off the top of my head. I see two reasons for that. One is a problem of competency, and two
Yeah,
is that the left wing justification for violence stops short of some sort of biological triggers. Like, actually, this is not worth my life, or this is not worth
yeah.
life. So the unwillingness to go through, and yeah, commitment and competence could be two ways in which.
The competence one was my immediate thought, but the commitment one might be as well. Well, I'll add that in. I mean, considering that also, then what happened was some guy tried to shoot up what was it, the ICE facility, and then he ended up hitting three illegals or detainees. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's the thought about not being able to go through with this is that what if I kill my own side? What if I kill one of ours? And
Yeah.
I was also just looking at a study that shows people on the right have no qualms about criticizing other people on the right. Actually, showed it in data. They are fine with disagreeing, and but they have a lot of liking for other people on the right. And it's the opposite in people on the left. They will not go against people on their own side because it's no bad tactics,
And
just
they
bad
hate
targets.
everybody, including themselves.
But then when you looked at liking, the liking was very low for other leftists. So
Interesting.
they also, I mean, they hated the right more, but their just
Yeah.
liking levels were really low across the board. But
Yeah.
they won't betray each other. They've got that group solidarity thing. The right doesn't do that. They police their own for a far greater degree. I mean, we can just witness this all the time
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
right, probably that disgust reaction, by the way, I would imagine you're disgusted, the moral foundations work, right? Of I'm disgusted, this person is part of my tribe. So I'll react.
There's that other brilliant um, graph where it shows that it's these two poles, and it's left and right, and there's more agreement or a tighter
Yes.
realm of ideology on the left, and then the
Oh,
right is
yes.
much more spread out on all their belief systems. And I don't know exactly how that was calculated, but it's
Mhm.
intuitively, mimetically true. And
Yeah.
that's why, ironically, liberalism is a more powerful tool on the right, or
Right.
a liberal disposition where you understand difference, and you seek to interact with people in a way where you're not
Hmm.
trying to dominate each other, but trying to maximize the cooperation.
Right.
You need to actually have a better understanding of a liberal predisposition to get things done on the right, because it really is
Yeah.
hurting cats in a way.
Right. Yeah. By nature, I know the exact chart you're referring to, and yeah, unfortunately I don't know the study or how that was calculated.
Yeah,
The weights one I do, the weights 2014 analysis, the heat map, that one I know a
yeah,
hell of a lot about, uh, but this one I'm not familiar. And yeah, I mean, intuitively it does make sense, and you see that because people on the right look at all the different positions. You do have some of the more fashy people. And then you've got libertarians and anarcho-capitalists,
hmm,
who could not
yeah,
be basically any further from each other, but they all are on the right. Whereas on the left, and they gatekeep, not in terms of keeping people out, but in terms of gatekeeping being part access to the in group and any of its benefits. They put very, very strong
hmm,
fences around their ideology of what the beliefs you have to hold at all times to be accepted as being on the left. Whereas on the right, there's that policing, the community policing doesn't and can't happen because you have people all over the actual political spectrum from fascist to ANCAP.
yeah,
But on the left, they have to control what everyone believes. It's keeping them very, very much in line in
yeah,
terms of the size of their ability of
yeah.
what they are allowed to think.
Yeah, which is
And that's
ironically
is
how to
very
control,
powerful.
like, a small
Yes.
organized group
Hmm.
of people. Like, this is elite theory, and why the
Yeah.
left ends up winning over and
Yeah.
over and over again.
Because of the extensive amount of control that they culturally, just socially exude upon each other
Yeah,
to conform.
yeah. But if you extrapolate that likingness, or that
Hmm.
desire to like things, and kind of psychologize it, I don't know if this rings true with you or not. It just seems like you'd be more miserable because you're liking less things.
Yes. I mean, and if it was like, I guess, a zero sum game of liking, but
Yeah,
if I mean, it does, that also seems intuitively true. We know that they have higher rates of mental disorders.
yeah,
They seem to, I think the ones I've looked at also showed they tend to report lower levels of life satisfaction and happiness. And that makes sense. They're often very, very dour and focus on the negative. So that would also track. So maybe, yeah, they just dislike everything. But again, the interesting thing is that the people on the right, they didn't agree with the things other people on the right were saying in the study I was looking at, but they
Hmm.
liked them at least. So they were
Hmm.
just happier, I guess. Whereas on the left, yeah, they obviously hate the right or anyone they perceive as being on the right. They hate them, but they don't seem to get along with each other well either. So I don't know. It must be miserable. Again,
Well, when I was, during that walk away movement during the 2020s and stuff, one of the red pills for people to distance themselves from leftism was that this realization that they're not happy and that
yeah,
everybody around them just isn't happy, and they're talking this game. It's that meme that popped up, the metalheads look like the meanest son of bitches on the block, but they're the nicest guys you can meet, and
right,
the
right.
hippies are the nicest looking guys on the block, but they're rather judgmental
Yeah,
and
cruel. Yeah,
cruel. Yeah, cruel for the right reasons though.
right,
I'm wondering,
right.
is there any way for you to reverse engineer from the terrorist data? What does it say about right wing? If we study our crazies,
Hmm.
if you study the crazies, and the cool thing about centrists is that they have this way of with their horseshoe theory, they get to wash
Hmm.
their hands of their own crazies, because they can always cast them into radicalism, so
Yeah.
they're really unable to own up to their own
Oh, I've
craziness.
I've got something interesting on that actually. That specifically.
What do you think?
Well, I was just looking at it yesterday, or was it the day before? But I came across this article that was published in Nature of all things, so a very esteemed journal. And they were claiming, well, the right has this greater predisposition, just in general, towards rhetoric that justified violence or excused violence.
Hmm.
However, when I went and looked at the data, I noticed that those effect sizes were very small. They were all statistically significant and consistent, but very, very small. And like the kind of, specifically, it was what kind of like nasty language will you justify? Obscenity, making violent threats, like what
Yeah.
levels will you accept towards other people on the other side? When I went in and looked, however, at the distribution of the data, I found that that was comparing center leftists and one just like the totality of that sample on the left was just two standard deviations from the mean. The right, it went up to five standard deviations from the mean, and it was all over the place. So center
Uh,
leftists are only very, very slightly more likely to be like disgustingly rude and make calls for violence and insult and harass people
yeah.
than is the the considerably farther right.
Yeah. So they were comparing leftist centrists to the farthest right in order to cook the data, maybe, or to justify their.
If it was an attempt to cook the data, I you know what, I guess wow, that's telling. I didn't even consider that they did it on purpose, or that they maybe threw out because it really did cut off. It cut off right at two standard deviations. That's actually now wait, like I said, I only read this 2 days ago. I might have to reconsider how I report
Hmm.
on that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would just hope that people wouldn't do things like that when they are
Yeah.
running statistical analysis and publishing them in
Yeah.
Nature. But it is possible, I suppose. My good faith argument would be probably just the way that it was the way they sampled just didn't get a lot of far leftists, but that is strange.
Yeah.
The implication there is though is that people in the center left are just about only very slightly less violent toward than are people on the considerable further right.
Or at least rhetorically.
Rhetorically, yes. This was not in terms of actual violence. This was just
Yeah.
making threats on the internet essentially was the
Yeah.
specific looking at Twitter. So I got a little confused with another study for a second, but this was yeah the online threats,
Yeah.
and specifically on Twitter.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks and again they were less so, but they were less so to a very small amount than was
Yeah.
the right and people much further right, just at a statistical
Well,
level.
the KYS.
Sure.
So from my Twitter's definitely become much more 4chan-ish since
Yeah.
Musk
Yeah.
took it over. There are certain words that are bandied about much more. Uh,
Yes.
words that start with N, that start with F, start with
Yeah.
G even and R.
Yeah.
These words that were off limits are now bandied about a lot. And people, it seems like the right is much, and we're talking about anons, and we're talking about people who are participating in a friend enemy distinction,
Yeah.
which I'd like to hear your nuanced take on that analysis if you have any thoughts on that. But the right wing is much more okay with calling people names that have to do with
Yes.
derogatory identity groups, whereas the left kind of, it speaks in terms of existential, go and KYS, go and unalive yourself.
Yeah.
Much more, they're much more harsher. So it does skew. So it does seem that the right is less allergic to group level slurs like
It,
homosexuality
it,
or their relationship to a Semitic tribe or any
mhm.
given thing.
It's interesting you say that because even with that skewed sample, the only thing that they found that people on the left did more than people on the right was obscenity. The left was far more obscene. So I don't know how if they
Hmm.
classified like a racial slur as obscenity or not, or
Yeah,
I
or
think
bodily
KYS
functions.
or bodily function, but it might have, I mean, they did classify that as obscene. So if they classified, say, the N-word as obscene,
Yeah.
because I don't think slurs was its own thing. I think I'll have to recheck that now because if that was considered obscenity, then again the right did it less. That even in the very skewed sample of
Hmm.
comparing very center leftists to center right to relatively moderately to even some far right people on the other side, they
Hmm.
used statistically more obscenity. So again, I'd have to look into that, but that I do notice with them. Yeah, it's not the slurs. It's not the slurs for sure. Although they've got their own slurs, to be fair,
Yeah. Well,
that they use.
fascist, Nazi, stuff like
Sure.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
White, I mean, there's all kinds of things that they
Yeah.
find to be slurs or they use as
Yeah.
slurs.
Yeah, that they
But
use as slurs, but don't carry the same weight that a
right,
statistical analysis, especially coming from center left, would
yeah,
ping
would
or would be
pick up
classified
on.
because it's coded in a
Well,
way.
yeah, it was. I mean, it was coded by people. It was 11 coders. I had to look into it after I saw these messed
Mm.
up, these strange results.
Hmm.
Of the 11 coders, 8 of them identified as leftists. So I think there's some skewing in the coding of that data as well.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes interesting how a methodologically flawed survey or study like that can actually give you a great deal of insight into what's happening accidentally. I've had that
Hmm.
happen a few times before, where by
Hmm.
realizing that maybe they were trying to pull a little bit of a fast one there, I actually found out quite a bit more about what was actually going on.
Yeah, or
Uh,
how
yeah.
these things are perceived. So, in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the right didn't or has not erupted in violence, but I do think that there's a level of radicalization or in-group versus out-group recognition by not necessarily moderate right wingers, but mild mannered right wingers. I think people are much more aware of the game that's being played.
Yeah.
And instead of cities or suburbs devolving into riotous violence, there were vigils and prayer circles. And I believe church attendance has blipped up a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yep.
So the right wing reaction to an existential threat is not the same as a left wing reaction to an existential threat, because I do think
Yeah.
that there is some sort of equivalence on a cultural level between the death of George Floyd and the murder of Charlie Kirk. And I am
Yeah.
using those terms
Yes.
very specifically because those are two different events. But when George Floyd um, became a rallying cry for the left, they, including their elites, one erupted in violence on the street level
Hmm.
and then covered for the violence
Yes.
on
Yes.
the elite level. That, I don't know if the right is not allowed to do that because they'd automatically win if they went violent,
Right.
or if they're not as predisposed towards violence, or it just doesn't make sense for them to burn down their own houses to smite their ideological opponents, which the left has no problem doing.
Yeah, I think it's actually maybe more than anything the latter one because the duality there is that when a tragedy happens on the right, then you get in-group homophily and
Hmm?
the tight in-group homophily, kinship,
Hmm.
moving into like people after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I saw all kinds of people who hadn't talked to each other for years. I had people I hadn't talked to for years
Yeah.
reach out to me and just everyone in the time since, I actually was talking to my husband about this yesterday, totally unrelatedly, is that it feels vibes. But a lot of people were reporting similar kind of things, that there's a sense of being closer together because we have to, because there is a giant mortality salience that's hanging over everybody right now, which
Hmm.
is that the tribe, whether, and I mean just the political tribe, the West, whatever they want to call it, is in significant danger.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
even people who, and it's because Charlie Kirk, I think, wasn't, I mean, obviously he was very remarkable and spoke to a lot of people, but because he wasn't an extremist and he didn't have any kind of real major institutional power, he's not a politician, it made it seem like, well, that could be my friend. That could be, someone I know, part of
Yes.
my in group, part of the tribe, a
Yeah.
regular member, not like the king who you might expect is going to get
Well, I
killed
mean,
or,
he's very, rather powerful. He's rather
yes,
prominent. There's no way
yes,
around that. His
for sure.
his memorial
It was
service,
like,
whatever that was
yeah,
fair.
he was kind of perfectly positioned in a
Mm,
way in that because he's not too far a politician, institution of power. He did have institutional power, but the
yeah.
rubber stamped official power. And he also wasn't just some random guy on the street. Like
Yeah.
unfortunately, someone like Irina Zarutska,
But he would
you know,
talk to everybody. He would
and
talk to everybody. He
hmm
he he manifested the core liberal
but
values
yeah,
from a right wing point of view. We're going to talk this through.
I mean, the left does not see that as a core liberal value at all. Obviously, if you're,
Yeah.
if it's not free speech, if it's hate speech. So,
Yeah.
he was not doing something liberal there, I'm sure, in their perspective. But
So
yeah, that's what I mean. Perfectly positioned though from what he did and his message, which was get out there and,
yeah.
and talk and try to actually have a conversation rather than screaming and hating. And that he was socially well positioned, where yes, this guy is sort of normal. He has lots of power and he's very rich and he's very connected and he knows
Yeah.
he's met President Trump and he's met all these important people, but still normal enough and came out of a sort of like podcasting. I mean, still
Yeah.
GOP celebrity, but uh, that hit people, I think, differently because of a parasociality to a certain extent. That this
Yes.
guy's just been around and a normal
I didn't
guy.
even realize I had that level of parasocial relationship to him until after
No,
it just affected me in a profound way. It threw
yeah,
me
me as
for a
well.
loop and a lot of people that I would listen to responding to that, a lot of people said I really never watched him. I
I
really
didn't
didn't
even like
agree.
him,
You
but
know, I
it
didn't,
was, yeah. I mean,
yeah, but
he wasn't my favorite podcaster. I'd seen him in a few things. I think I'm sure he was at CPAC the year I was there, but I can't remember. One time after it first happened, you have to go back and review your memories. And at first I thought, did I meet him at CPAC? But I don't think so upon further review. Um, but the fact that I had to think about whether or not that was true was also very surreal, as whether or not I had ever met the guy who just was assassinated in front of thousands of people. So yeah, I think I mean, it had again, that's how distant I am from it. And it had a profound
yeah.
effect on me and pretty much everyone I know who was on the right, whether or not they liked him or, made fun of him for having a small face in a,
Hmm.
the kind of normal way you would joke about another person who does political commentary, lighthearted banter stuff. But, and the left's reaction, of course, was incredibly telling, and that's been the focus of it. But I actually, maybe in some ways, find the right's reaction, which has been continual. I kind of expected, oh, this will die off in a day, a week,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure it has. Maybe it has. Something feels a bit different to me, at least. And
Yeah.
everyone I've talked to has said the same thus far.
Yeah. So there is this, I'm fascinated by the, post IDW centrist classical liberal that I always put in
Mhm.
quotes, reaction to the right and their attempt to maintain the Overton window and to police it in these really weird ways. But this reaction to Schmidt, this reaction to the friend enemy distinction, from the classical liberal, it is such a bad reading of Schmidt himself, but also
Yes.
not understanding the possibility that a friend enemy distinction will differ in its quality
Yeah.
between the right and the left. The
Yes.
right's friend way of navigating the friend enemy distinction is not going to be on par every single time with 1930s Germany. It's not going to be that way. There might be some trappings or aesthetic echoes, and it's really funny to watch. It's funny, and that's why it might be disturbing. It's funny to watch the dissident right, the E-right, the anonymous right, to identify more and more with stormtroopers, with the Nazis and stuff like that. But if you actually see the effect that Charlie Kirk's assassination is having on the right, is that they are drawing a friend-enemy distinction, but that's making them, like you said, homophily.
Yeah,
it's making them to be to those barriers between, or the differences between them, matter less. And so it's strengthening, and yet they still are very aware of the enemy, but they're not. The friend enemy distinction is not playing out.
Well, I mean, everyone engages in friend enemy distinction at all times, whether or not they like the term, or they're real upset that Carl Schmitt was a Nazi or something, very performatively. It doesn't matter. And the people who, I mean, obviously the people who are criticizing it for whatever reason, usually again because of who Carl Schmitt was, which is a piss poor reason to critique something that is obvious and clearly exists. Because again, they go around and do it immediately afterwards. Associate names with you, associate you with someone else, or associate you with an idea that makes you bad, that makes you the enemy, and treat you as an enemy. It is there's no way to get around that. That's basic survival instinct. You have to be able to detect a friend from foe to survive.
Yeah. But why is that so hard to comprehend? I don't understand why it's so hard to comprehend, or what
I don't think it is. No, it's what Millennial Woes said. It's because they are pretending. They're basically pretending not to understand. They absolutely do, though. They do.
Yeah.
They're pretending to be R-worded,
Yeah, but for what reason? Why would the centrist not want a strong right? Like, that's just the thing. I'm a liberal. I want liberalism, but it has to come within a reasonably policed boundary. I want my liberty to match on to the laws of my land, which is something that Newsfist, who's a great guy, you should interact with him if you haven't already.
He was on my podcast on Wednesday.
Okay, he's just a brilliant guy. He kind of came out of nowhere, but he's one of those guys who's been working for 10 years and then suddenly.
I've met him in real life. We went to the Wittan together. I bummed smokes off of him. Yeah.
Okay. But he was saying that when we talk about liberty or wanting liberty, what we want is our natural behavior, the Venn diagram between our natural behavior and the laws of the land to almost perfectly overlap. Sure. We don't want the liberty to poop in the middle of the street. We want the liberty to speak our mind, or to understand intuitively that a difference of opinion is not an existential threat. We want the lightest form of friend-enemy distinction in order to percolate cooperation with the most different people from us, because that is where a lot of the engine of the West has been. The energy that the engine of the West has been running on is the ability for different people, different ideas to come together and to check themselves. And Vervaeke calls it competitive co-processing, right? Where it looks like you're fighting, but you're actually building something greater than yourself.
Yeah, I mean, when you work on a project with someone, like on a PhD thesis or something with your advisor, obviously, I mean, there's an argument that you're having there back and forth of how to go about it, but it's to further that work. In terms of what I think is going on there is, I think it's the Whig view of history that has gotten warped up and wrapped up in this, which is that some ideas are bad, and they prevent this process of actual debate and talking about ideas from happening, because the ideas are so bad that they are a threat to the exchange of ideas to occur. And there are things of the past, specifically is how they're almost always framed. This is in the past. And again, if we're trying to move towards this utopian future, and whether or not they're utopians by admittance or not, there is this just underlying.
Well, they have to kill themselves as anti-utopian, because they've tied utopianism with all of their enemies. So they can't be that, even though they act as though they're aiming or agitating for a utopia.
It's more that the past was always bad. Whatever happened before was always worse, I think, more than maybe looking forward in a positive way. It's just that everything in the past was bad and backwards. And I think that's the kind of underlying premise that happens there. So any ideas that are tied to the past, well, that they're tied to the bad. Yeah. And we don't want to go back to the bad times. Even if right now sucks, it was worse then. For some reason, some grievance,
I was thinking about this because I've been chewing on this a lot because my friends have now become kind of my enemies because they're making enemies out of my friends. So I'm trying to navigate like what exactly about the classical liberal is off. And you're right about them disparaging the past, but they whitewash the past too. Like it's in the name classical liberal. And how I kind of intuitively understood this is that the word classical brings to mind these bleached pure
Athens,
monuments.
Hmm.
But if you actually go back in time, those monuments that are now bleached and stripped of all of their cultural
Or colorful.
were all colorful. They were gaudy. They had a particular aesthetic that is not classical in a way. So there's this desire to achieve a classical aspiration and this distinct dislike of particularity. There's two things that the classical liberal has a problem with: particularity and authority.
Yes.
But they're blind to their own particularity, to their own cultural embeddedness, their historical embeddedness, and they're also blind to just how totalizing their authority structure necessarily is.
I mean, it's anemoia is the term for a wanderlust for a time that has never existed. So essentially, a false. It's this the things that they like about the past aesthetically or as basis for liberalism, etc. They pick and choose, and have and create this whitewashed version that's stripped of all of its all of its color, and all of its nuance, a version of the past, and that they do want to return to. And with a lot of people who call themselves liberals or centrists, you see a large amount of wanderlust, anemoia for the 90s, a colorblind return to Fresh Prince, that kind of stuff. But the 1990s in America, when things were so perfect, was a time of a lot of race riots, for example, crack cocaine epidemic. I mean, it was not that there were serious problems. The crime rates in the 90s were the highest they've ever been in the US. So, but things, I guess, a lot of that gets forgotten about because, well, a lot of people were kids or teenagers and, didn't have big boy responsibilities at that point in time. And there'll always be a little bit of that because things are better when you're younger and have more energy and aren't as cynical about the world, I guess. Just your perspective's different. So there's always a little bit of that kind of nostalgia, right? But the reason why they get the anemoia of liberalism is, picking and choosing very carefully which parts of the past we need to return to. That I think just are like comfort blankets, sort of.
What do you think the state of the fringe right is, or not the fringe, but the avant-garde right is? Is it going in a good direction? Is it strengthening? Because I see a process of legitimization, which is another thing that makes the classical liberal wary. It's like, wait, you guys have more power than me. The power's actually listening to you guys much more than they're listening to me. My colorblindness and anti-racism return to a previous iteration of anti-racism, actually.
Right. Yes,
right?
yes.
Is better
doing
than
the same
this
thing, different outcome,
racial consciousness. So there is good criticisms of racism or racialism on the right. There's negative, toxic manifestations of that, but I see that it's two different things: to be aware of race and to prefer your race, and then to be actively anti the other race. It's it's another friend enemy distinction. You can be tribal and actually have a noble tribalism that is not against existentially every other given tribe, or worried about the other tribe necessarily.
I mean, it's evident prima facie. Every other group is allowed to do this. It's only a problem when it's whites that express preferred, in-group preference. No one would have any problem with a Latino saying, I prefer to be around other Latinos, or a black guy saying he preferred to be around other black people. There may be a couple, but it would only be to point out hypocrisy. The other people, generally speaking, I think if someone said, well, hey, there's a problem with that, the problem would only be, why am I not allowed to say that as a white person? You know? It's just been carved out as an exception. It's the Schmittian exception to that, right?
Yeah. And what happens, I guess the question then is how to navigate a return to white racial consciousness, because there's a low form of that. And then I believe there's a noble chivalric form of that, a purely positive one that was construed as Nazi or racist 5 years ago, but is now just kind of mimetically reinforcing itself. And you see that is what is where the young people are attracted to, the young
Yes.
white men specifically are attracted to a pride in their race and an ownership of their identity on that tier. But there's got to be a proper way to build that up and to include that in an improper way. Maybe, I don't know.
I think the best thing people can do, and again, I think this has happened since the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is just get involved in local things and build community. Because that part about
Mm-hmm.
also them not being the right not being able to organize, which appears to be or used to be true. I'm not sure if it's going to be as difficult. I don't know if this actually has any lasting impact. Because even if
Yeah.
it's regardless of how impactful the precipitating event is, if it's caused some sort of cultural shift, and again, if winning the World Cup can cause a change in how many sons are born, I
Yeah.
do think people can be affected by these like Jungian mass psychology events to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
There's, oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
no, that was mostly it. Yeah,
Well,
I think.
the other aspect that produces drag on the scaling of the avant-garde right to becoming a dominant cultural force is the sex relationship, the ratio of happy heterosexual relationships and the possibility of happy heterosexual relationships.
Well,
And so
high
if the
possibility
right
for a homosexual one in the right in the far
Oh
right.
yeah, they do have they do have that interesting strain, but in the more normie level, it's
Yeah.
that in order for this to scale, there has to be a reformulation, a post-liberal reformulation of not necessarily sex roles, but a recognition. It's sex awareness. It's just like the
Yeah.
race thing. It's like men and women are different,
Mhm.
and they want different things, and if we can recognize that, then we can build that into our ideology in a way that will propagate itself, like literally propagate itself. But it's really hard when liberalism and modernity and progressivism is giving maximum liberty to females, even if it's hiding all,
They're a
even if
client
it's
group. Yeah.
even if it's hiding the cost behind all this bureaucracy that is actually
Mhm.
eroding their actual agency in a broad sense, and then in an evolutionary sense, it's still a hard sell for the trad, um, humble wife follow a man, especially if the men aren't worth following. So I'm wondering, as a female on the right, what are some of the ways in which the right can pitch itself to possible centrist women or women that are open to
Um,
being more based?
the thing is that it doesn't actually have to do anything. I don't think there's anything to be done against the natural system that exists because I actually think women are followers inherently. They want to be protected. They're highly discriminatory. That's what gossiping all is extreme amounts of. I mean, that's just picking someone apart and instantly coming up with everything. These evolutionary warnings.
Hmm.
Is this person a threat? Or are they a friend? Again, friend enemy distinction. All these things that women do, they're highly discriminatory. And women want to be taken care of whether or not they say it, they do, but they just use the government for it. So everything women are, in my opinion, actually just the natural state setting is to actually be conservative,
Hmm.
but what women do is they are going to follow whatever is going to give them resources. The
Yeah.
state is what gives them resources to a much easier way, and so
Yeah.
the all of the liberalism is justification on top of that, essentially for just going where stability is, and they also
Yeah.
will go for who's winning or who they perceive of as winning, the stronger, side,
Yeah.
I guess, like that, because you
Yeah.
don't want to be in the out group and get killed. So you want to be on the right side to be protected. So
Yeah.
they just see, I believe, the left as being in power, and this may change in a way that is also being, affected by this underlying force, which is this is the side that is giving you resources.
Hmm.
This is the side
Hmm.
that is giving you power also,
Hmm.
and the other side
Hmm.
is not.
Yeah.
So, but if the right comes to power genuinely in some way, that where it really changes, women will go there anyway.
Yeah.
It has power and resources and status. That's where women will go because women will
Hmm.
follow power and resources and status no matter what. And I
Yeah.
think psychologically, underlyingly, out of just pure evolutionary need, women are more conservative,
Hmm.
and all the
Hmm.
other crap is going on top of just the baseline need to be protected and need to be discerning.
There's that meme that's not exactly true, but in the wake of Carl Rittenhouse in Kenosha, there was a meme on the right, like you aim a gun, you randomly shoot a crowd of leftists and you hit two pedophiles and a wife beater or something like
Yeah.
that, you know.
But he shot
Um,
the pedophile in the groin, the wife beater in the heart, and the thief in the hand, in the arm.
really.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
that seems a bit
memetics.
divine, right? Or mimetic, yeah.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, divine. No, the that archetypal level of what's going on is so profound when you look
Yeah.
at it. You're like, wow.
Yeah.
But with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the tendency for these unstable people on the left to borrow a phrase, troon out,
Yeah.
um, I think will eventually. It's inherently unstable. So just
Yeah.
highlighting how unstable the left is. And I mean, maybe the men on the right need to be a little bit more. I think they're doing brilliant. A lot of these commentators are doing brilliant work, showing out, home math and a few other people are kind of showing the hypocrisy or the problems with female psychology and stuff. But over relying on that too much is not a signal of strength. It's a signal of it could be construed as a signal of like complaining rather than doing. And
Yeah.
so,
And young men in particular get enough of everything being blamed on them. So I understand that's why the accounts that really blow up, and again, I like Homath's stuff, but why that kind of anti-woman stuff is very popular is one, it's because it's the only place where men ever get told pretty much that it's no, it's not your fault.
yeah.
Not everything is your fault. Uh, that's why it's more appealing than to say, well, maybe there are some things that men could be doing because, which I don't think there's a whole, I don't know what regular people can do besides get involved, go to pub, get involved with real people and make real connections in the real world. Over here in the UK, we're about to, I've been working with this group called the Pendragon Foundation, run by
Hmm.
Nathan Hood. Go follow him on Twitter, Nathan Hood, or Pendragon Foundation. And what they're doing is just they're right now just selling calendars. They're about to launch one in a book, I think, that I have a piece in. And it's just to raise money and funds and build community around restoring castles.
Hmm.
And there's also the Basket Weavers, or the other big group in the UK, that if you want to just go down to pub and hang out with
Hmm.
regular people and form friendship bonds, it's not inherently political. It's just going and forming friendships and bonds with other people who live near you. Yeah, check out the Basket Weavers if you live in the UK and aren't already aware of them, which I imagine probably most listening are. But
Hmm.
that's the kind of stuff I think people need to get more involved in because it's
Hmm.
outside of all of the power structures. And that gets back into exactly what the Charlie Kirk assassination has done, which is bring people together. The left spurgs out, drives people apart, burn things down. That's how they
Hmm.
react to a tragedy. The right
Hmm.
moves in,
Hmm.
uh, in the phalanx, or whatever.
Hmm. So what's coming up next for you?
Yeah, the
Terrorism.
the well, it was about the violence. Is the left more violent than the right? And
Yeah.
I think the answer is, and again, I've been working on it for a few days now. The answer
Yeah.
seems to be no, they're about equally, if they're at least equally violent in intent. The left actually seems to be more violent in intent, but
Yeah.
either because they don't have the heart to do it or because they are incompetent. In actuality, they are less likely to commit crimes, but they're
Well,
not less, they're more likely to plan them.
their leadership
So
covers for it. And if you look
that
at,
too.
I don't
Yeah.
know if you're going to be covering what the Weather Underground, the Days of Rage,
Yes.
because it's
Inevitably
totally
must,
papered
yeah.
over. Like the 70s
Yes.
were just
Yeah.
massively domestic terrorism in the U.S. and we just don't talk about it. I guess Philip Roth did a rather good book about it called American Pastoral, where it
Yeah.
gets into that a little bit in a very beautiful, evocative way. But
The
totally
most
papered over
violent,
by our institutions.
once you scrape out the Islamic and Muslim data from these massive data sets, some of the most violent groups are also these environmentalist groups. I mean, they've
Hmm.
the not PETA or anything, but like these animal rights organizations, Save the Trees kinds of people have been incredibly violent, and that's
Yeah.
been, yeah, completely. They're green, so they're like they're the hippies, they're the nicest people ever. No, they've done a whole hell of a lot of terrorism over the years.
Hmm.
And again, I don't think no one even has that impression of like, maybe again with the PETA stuff, but that's generally not the association that's tied with they're
Yeah.
annoying, they block roads, but not that they're violent and dangerous, but they are. I mean,
Yeah.
historically they have been.
Well, what's your
And
take on
yeah.
Uncle Ted's early outbursts?
Uh, I think Uncle Ted was a genius. and a very tortured one. And I don't think he could figure out how to. I, I, I think he was probably right about the industrial society and its consequences to a certain extent. But I think sending mail bombs probably wasn't obviously the correct answer
Yeah.
to that one.
I guess
Uh,
he wouldn't have been. Was he coded right or left or this odd
it
just
depends. Well,
anti-progress?
I also was able to recode the data. So, e- just for my own, purposes. Because again, it's just a database. It's all just sitting there. You can choose how to code it yourself.
Yeah.
Nothing's
Okay.
stopping you. Um, I know, of course, I'll have to say that if I include any, which I had done some on my own. If you, it depends, yeah, on how you code groups or individuals. And I think with TED, it does depend on well, I know it depends on the database, but they get, what is it called now? It's like oh shoot, what's the name for it specifically? Oh yeah, the anti-technology, anti-modernity
Hmm.
terrorist designation. And I think the Paris data set has a classification for essentially what, a anarcho-primitivist or whatever,
Yeah. Okay.
as you would call it,
Yeah.
whatever that sort of, yeah, anti-tech, anti-modernity terrorism, which
Yeah.
they maybe had to invent because of TED, but obviously he wasn't the only one. He's
Yeah.
the only one who feels that way
Well, he
or
had
thought
some
that way.
choice words to say about progressives or
Yeah,
liberals. So I wonder how
yeah.
you would classify him. Are you a part of a foundation, or if somebody out there is just turned on in a in the right way or in a good clean way by your way of approaching data, by your style of working in the political sphere? I'm wondering, are you a part of, like, can people like join you, or do you do little team things? Do you do any like team leadership things? Do you have little
No,
classes or anything like that?
no, I just have my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I do a lot of, again, because I live over here in this side of the pond. I do go to quite a lot of events over here
Yeah.
and speaking events. But no, I don't have anything like that besides just the YouTube channel. Although I again recommend people go check out things like Pendragon, check out the Basket Weavers. I wish I had an equivalent to this in the United States, but unfortunately, live here for 6 years, and
Yeah,
in
no,
terms
there's
of finding local stuff, local
the
is relative. So,
yeah, oh man, I'm slipping. I'm going to go to their event in south of Portland next month. They're called the
Schildings? Well, Schildings is doing something, aren't they?
they're
At
doing
some
basket
point.
weaves. It's just like, it's very. I've interviewed them. Dave
Hmm.
Green's one of their founding members. It's the Old Glory Club.
Oh, Glory Club. Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep. Yep.
and
Yep.
they have chapters all over the United States. I'm just wondering, because you
Yes.
were
Yes. They're a great one.
agitating,
Yeah.
or you're disappointed in your interaction on YouTube. You put tons
Yeah.
of work into your videos, and it doesn't seem you're getting a return on your investment. I'm wondering if there's something in your fate or destiny that's calling you to do something bigger, to be a professor, even an online professor, or to be a part of some sort, or found some sort of think tank, because your brand of engagement on the political level is so incredibly data driven that it
Yeah.
can scale up or be a part of like some major operations and stuff. So I'm wondering if, I mean, and maybe you just you're too coy, or you have to keep things under wraps and stuff. But I'm wondering
No.
if you have any intuition to build upon your foundation.
I mean, I'd like to with the SRB video. I understand it was disappointing to me because I felt like I really found out something that was very useful and vital because again, cuts through all of the kind of BS.
Noise. Yeah.
And I thought this is like a great way to approach the topic of immigration and approach the topic of what actually is happening in the West because you can't cover it up with any kind of excuses. It's just a
Hmm.
biological mechanism that no one has any say in outside of the people who kill their female children. But
Hmm.
other than that, it just happens naturally. So I thought it was very useful. And the the reason I was at first I was a little miffed. Has picked up some steam on that.
Hmm.
But what I really needed to happen from that, and which made itself evident to me in the days after that, is the people who needed to see that video saw it or planned to watch it,
Yeah.
and that's again that part of the in-group stuff of
Hmm.
because it's so very data heavy, and I do that on purpose so that you can double check it and you can make sure that it's correct. So you have the source, but then other people who are able to probably translate that into a way that is not so nerdy. Uh, one, I'm not good at that, at not being so nerdy. And two, if I'm not nerdy, then it's not as compelling and it doesn't matter because it's just me,
Yeah.
saying
Yeah.
whatever. I'm not evidencing this scientifically.
Yeah.
So, but then those people can take that and talk to their audiences or talk to other people who trust them to then look
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
And in terms of the influence of the SRB stuff, I started seeing other people talk about essentially that, even if I'm 99% sure they didn't see my video and they didn't use the same language, but they
But it's
started to
in the
talk
air
about
now.
the concept.
Yeah.
And that's the best thing that could have
Yeah.
possibly happened for me
Yeah.
was I want this idea to be known.
Yeah.
And whether or not they see my video on it, I mean, I would prefer that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what really matters is that the idea percolates, through the ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah. There's just a natural way in which the viscosity of your content is rather
Yeah.
dense.
Yes.
So but it goes through the process of being watered down and then traveling through, and then has the indirect impact on the
Yeah.
everything. So you just have to
I
be a
mean,
little bit patient. But I think you should be more
yeah.
rewarded for sure.
Well, I mean, sure, I would be happy about that. But just days after I published that video, and now this is pure serendipity, at least that it happened in the same general week. But there was a massive study that was published out of Australia on the skewed sex ratio due to female feticide, and it made huge rounds on right-wing Twitter. And
Mm,
so again, study just happened to be published apparently like 4 or 5 days after I put my video out on the
yeah,
exact same subject matter and made the rounds again. So that actually was again serendipitous. But maybe it's also once an idea enters the milieu, then it can propagate more easily. And it's the idea that's important. So, and I've sort of seen that happen with some things I've put out in there in the past with a couple. I was one of the I did not obviously write the weights analysis, but I did one of the earliest videos on it.
of
The
what
heat map, weights 2014, the you know
in group
liberals care yes, in group out group preference and how much care you assign to um things that are proximal
rocks or
versus things that are distant,
your
rocks
child? Yeah,
versus family, yeah.
yeah,
Which is a little bit of a misunderstanding of the paper, to be fair, or misdescription of it. Easily just explained with the like liberal go away essentially out like crazy preference for space rocks or whatever. But yeah, I made an early video about that. Not shortly after it was published, but before kind of the only people I'd seen ever mention it were like on 4chan. And then
yeah,
shortly after I made that video over the next year or so, it became a much more commonly expressed idea became a meme. It didn't become a meme until after I made the video. And I'm not saying I'm responsible for that.
yeah.
It's just, hey, here's a place where there's a bunch of information about this that's presented in something of a digestible format, maybe. But at least if not just the video, it doesn't matter. I link to all the sources. So if you don't want to watch my dumb video, you can just go down to the description. All the citations are there.
Yeah.
So, and just that way it helps, circulate the ideas in the ether. And then you end up a couple years later and everybody knows that Waite's heat map.
Yeah.
It's a massive meme in
I think
politics.
I think the
I think the White
well
House
how I
posted it.
oh really? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Opinion dismissed.
Yeah. Opinion dismissed. Yeah.
The evolutionary framework is it's difficult because like I said at the beginning, we just naturally misread things as
Hmm.
having intention. We overemphasize intention constantly because that's how we formulate the world. Everything is formulated in terms of a goal and an end. We can't even pay attention to things that don't have
Yeah.
a use. They just don't even register for us. But evolutionary framework or analysis is really difficult, but it's very useful when used correctly. One thing that I've had a very successful video from the summer with Dr. Danny Sulikowski about manipulative female reproductive suppression,
Hmm.
which it's getting more and more views and more interaction because it really
I saw
explains
something about that today.
wokeness
Yeah.
and it's going around. I would at some point I would like to hear your thoughts on that if you ever have come across it, because it does match up with there's a way in which intuitively I feel SRB and the health of society and the aggregate female behavior towards females all speak
Yeah.
to times of plenty and times of lack,
Yep.
and then it might even be able to be pushed. Our feelings about ourselves do impact our success in the
Yeah.
world, and they're just fascinating things to take into account.
Yeah, well, in terms of the sex ratios too, something that's happening there. So, we still obviously, I mean, in terms of total society, it skews female, right? Just because of males' increased mortality. But it does matter at SRB for younger people because the younger they are, the more excess males you're going to have, just
Mhm.
because they haven't all died yet, right?
Yeah.
So in prime breeding, mating age, you will have more males, and there's research that finds that, for example, uh, in Australia, which is a natural experiment that happened there, where you had a ton of men and very few women, they found there's a study on it that found that in areas of Australia that were particularly one standard deviation increased skew in the sex distribution, that's adult sex distribution in those areas from the 1800s today results in areas that are where women are significantly less likely to work at all, less
Mm.
likely to, or they spend fewer hours per week, not just at work, but in childcare as well. They're,
Hmm.
they relax more because they had more of their
Yeah.
needs taken care of because they were more
They were
prized,
rare. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of stuff does affect long term and women's role in that. Yeah, it does matter like how many women versus how many men there are. It can
Yeah.
have
And
long term effects on that.
yeah, and then tie it with the cultural values about, I don't know, whether it's chivalry or institutionalized misogyny. I mean, if you take like the court of King Arthur versus Islamic Caliphate,
Yeah.
their attitudes towards the women do impact how women are treated, and then their life expectancy, and then what they can expect out of life too.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. It's also been the case that the transatlantic slave trade, again, a period in time where you instead have many, many women because the men were put on boats and taken away. So you have
mhm.
an excess of women in a society in the opposite direction. You find that today, women in areas that were one standard deviation more affected by the transatlantic slave trade are more likely to work, are more likely to spend more hours at work. So the exact opposite of what you see in Australia when there were too few women, when there were too many women, 100, 200 years ago. Today, those women work more. When there were too few women,
Hmm.
today you have women who work less.
Yeah. Well, I work more, work less is probably not accurate because they're just working, I guess, in rather than out of the home, or their labor is
It's
being
both.
concentrated. Oh, really?
It's yes, both be more likely to be in the workforce, and in terms of the time spent rearing children. So there's less time spent on child rearing in areas of Africa that were more affected by the transatlantic slave trade, which led to an excess of females. And in Australia, you have women who spend less time both at work and on child rearing in areas where there were many more males than there were females 150, 100 years ago.
Huh.
Yeah.
One wonders how that would affect the culture, if or what women are spending their time on, how close knit their communities are. Like, there's all these tack on effects that.
Well, what happened during World War One and Two to a lot of European countries? You have a massive loss of male life,
Yeah.
and then right out of that, you have feminism, where women, in that case, at least,
Hmm.
it could be both effects, I suppose. But in terms of women's rights, because in areas of Africa also where there were more women, because of so many men were lost, they also have more positive attitudes towards feminism and women's rights,
Hmm. Or
and women
women
having
in
an equal.
power. Like, what do you mean by feminism? Because that is a skewed term at this point.
Yeah,
But
so it was right, and that's not how it was in the data set. So to be specific, about women's ability to have an equal say in the household, about women's ability to have equal say in the finances of the household, about women's ability to work. Not support for female politicians, by the way, but I think
hmm.
that's for other reasons. That one
Hmm.
did not was no, no relationship there. But things that we might call feministy, I guess, that women, yes, not as caregivers and homemakers, but as workers, as equal to men in decision making and in ability to earn and be
Hmm.
productive. And those are in areas of Africa that were more affected by the transatlantic slave trade, leading to more skewed sex distributions. So
Hmm.
what do we have after World Wars One and Two? An excess of women. And you also
Hmm.
find an increase in attitudes towards women in the workforce, towards women having an equal say in the home and equal say in, relationship decisions.
Hmm.
So the exact same effect, in a way, of what happened in Africa as a result of the transatlantic slave trade is the same thing that happened in the West following the First and
Hmm.
Second World Wars.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah.
That's why
No.
the sex ratio at birth thing, it felt like there's this interesting little key that just lets you put anything in history sort of under a different perspective and think, well, how did that some and the other thing about it that's great is all of this data just exists because no one would ever think to not collect it. It's not
Yeah, yeah, you were
political.
saying that in your show the other way. It's
Hmm.
like they haven't gone through the trouble to hide the data because they don't need to, because nobody
There's no
thought
reason
about
to.
it. Yeah,
No one had,
yeah.
yeah, no one had considered it.
Well,
So,
now that you put it out there, Wikipedia will
oh
get on
yeah,
that, put it in its
that
place.
is the only cool part is that I've not seen anyone at all make the connections that I made with this. And that's why, like I said, just you can go to our world in data and look up the SRBs between 1950 and 2022 of every single country on Earth. It's
Hmm.
just sitting out there because no one would ever think to protect this information.
Hmm.
It doesn't seem in any way political. I,
Hmm.
I mean, once you think about it, it immediately becomes obvious it is, even if just about female feticide, right?
Hmm.
Because it means
Hmm.
you can't hide the female feet. You can't, once those numbers get too big, you can't hide it. It
Oh
just
yeah,
exists.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
this country is doing female feticide
Hmm.
unquestionably because of the numbers.
Hmm.
And if you go to our world in data and do that right now, you can see it on the map. It's
Hmm.
it's color coded, and you can see immediately what countries are doing female feticide.
Wow, wow.
So, but yeah, no reason to necessarily make that connection and or see why it would be problematic or would
Hmm.
need to be hidden. And so every country, obviously, when they do birth records, when they have to do census, has to collect these data.
Hmm.
So they just exist in excess, and you can go back with them. And I did it in the U.S. and the U.K. I went back to 1840 with it and did
Hmm.
my own analysis of
Hmm.
just looking at it and making, well, in terms of making a cohesive graph that went back that far. There were some that had data from certain years, but I took them both back to 1840
Well, it's
with
so
very
odd
little
because
difficulty.
the effect of it doesn't catch up for 20 years. I mean, you can have a blip or
Mhm.
a change in degree on, which affects this rate, but then 20 years later, when they are reproducing, that generation is reproducing, then the effect of that earlier
Yeah,
thing comes
right.
into play.
As to what the sex ratio of that cohort born in that year was. So
Yeah,
you have to think about everything on a bit of a sliding time scale because
yeah.
whatever the event is, it's going to be 6 to 9 months after that, and it's not going to directly coincide. You want to look 6 to 9 months before or after some event if you're trying to relate it to a change in SRB.
Yeah.
And then it then takes, yeah, 18, 20 years for the children of that particular sex ratio distribution in the population become adults and then have children of their own. So,
Yeah.
and then you can keep doing it down the line, and see what their cohort children will
I
be,
wonder. I wonder
etc.
if modernity has made too much noise because there's so many events that happen so
Yeah.
rapidly, and this mechanism is meant to is developed under tremendously long timescales with
Yes.
timescales in mind, and so with if modernity is just going up and down and up and down, I wonder if you perceive that introduces too much noise in the system, right?
It's more that you can it allows you to kind of detect the magnitude of something.
Oh, okay,
If
yeah,
you're not seeing any
okay,
change or it's just a normal, there is always an amount of variation on this for so many variable reasons that it's incalculable, right? So
hmm,
just constant little up and down shifts around the mean of 105.
yeah,
But it's when you start to see a big spike or a big drop, then you go, okay, what happened 6 to 9 months before that? That
hmm,
was culturally significant. And it's not necessarily going to be 100% right or anything, and you might
yeah.
guess the wrong thing, but look at, well, what happened 6 to 9 months before this that was culturally significant in some way that people would, and that's the other thing is that you can use it, you can think about this heuristically, because what affected you 6 to 9 months ago?
Hmm.
And it was something that you thought was a big deal, and we all know everyone's talking about it or something, then you
Yeah.
heuristically can process what, and that actually, that's why I was using a lot of AI for it, because it's just like, what happened 6 to 9 months before this reading?
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
anyway,
Yeah.
and particularly with new stuff, I can just go through Twitter even too and see if, I don't know, something trending caused Tylenol. Everyone's trending. Let's see what happens in 6 to 9 months
Yeah.
since the autism announcement.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I wonder if you could even make bank off of this by incorporating it into your stock portfolio
I guess based
analysis.
on yeah, but I'm not sure how you'd integrate it just based on how many sons will be born next year because you can. I
Yeah.
mean, you can predict for it. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know how you'd make money off of it, but there's probably money
Yeah.
in that somewhere. Betting, just start
Oh
making
yeah,
bets.
betting market.
Yeah.
Well, Aiden, always fascinating to have you.
Thanks
You're a
for having
bright
me.
star in
Oh,
my in my environment, and
oh, thank you.
I'll link to all your work down in the description. But do you have anything like a book coming out, or do you go in
No,
that direction ever, or
I'd like
merch?
I've been really yeah, I have a little merch store and I do have a Patreon and a Subscribe Star if you want to support me.
Hmm.
I preview all the videos live and you hang out in the chat with people. We can talk about it and then
Yeah.
yeah, and then you see it before everybody else. It's oftentimes in a bit of a rough state, but it's so
Hmm.
I can explain if there's anything that doesn't make sense um, through the what I'm going through. We can pause
Yeah.
and it sometimes takes many hours for that reason, so we can all talk about what's going on in that. Other than that, no, there's just my YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter. It's Aydin Paladin as well. I would like to do a book at some point. I've realized my friend Scrump. Oh yes, I usually link to that on my it's Nomos events on Twitter. My friend Scrump just published a book, and
Mm.
it's done really well. And essentially, what he did was rewrote and repurposed a bunch of blog posts he had, well, writings that he had done over the years, and just
Hmm.
formatted it as a book. And I could probably do something like that with a lot of the scripts essentially I've written for videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be fun. Something to think about in the future.
Well,
Not planning it currently.
I don't think people really appreciate just how odd you are. In that
Thanks.
you're basically a professor, but you're not institutionalized, and you can
Yeah.
take that in two directions. But you deserve to be, and you can take that in two directions. It's just interesting because I mean, because you bring such a high level of integrity to your work, like that you're not going to find. It's amazing that you're doing that, and it's just on YouTube. It's just
Yeah.
floating out there. It's not like hidden behind all these paywalls, or like you're not encrusted by all this credentialism, which
Yeah.
oddly enough you should be, but you would be less free maybe
Yeah.
if you
I
were.
mean, uh, there's probably some institutions that it would be okay. The biggest problem is at this point, as I thought about going and finishing my PhD, I never finished it. So I thought
Hmm.
about finishing, and I was looking at, but I'd have to. I mean, there really aren't PhD programs online still, even after COVID.
Mm.
They just don't do
Hmm.
that for
Hmm.
whatever. At least not in. There's a giant bug that's just flown in here. I'm sorry if you see my eyes darting. There's a large, gross bug. It's getting to be fall, so they're trying to fly inside.
Hmm.
Um, I think it would have to be like Liberty. I'd have to go back to the United States, is what I'm saying. And
Mm.
I live on an island with 80,000 people. There's no university here. Uh, there's
Hmm.
no higher education whatsoever. So that's the probably the biggest thing. But yeah, I, I'd love to. I just like to help as much as I can, and again, disseminate ideas. What really is more powerful, being able to have a YouTube channel where I make these videos, a couple people who will watch them, who will find them compelling enough to go take that information and tell a bunch of other people about it and
Hmm.
actually get that into the zeitgeist, or me sitting in a room and writing papers that no one will read.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that are cloistered behind the ivory tower, within the
Yeah.
ivory tower, and behind a bunch of paywalls.
Well,
That,
the
you
ivory
know,
tower does not have a monopoly on the truth or
no,
reality,
no,
rather. And you're working really hard and in a very like empirical, like the tried and true process of trying to get to the best
yeah.
view of reality out
With
there.
my limited resources, and
Yeah, with
I'm
you. Yeah.
very fallible,
Yeah, I don't mean to
obviously, on
just
this,
praise you without
Yeah.
any basis, but I'm just saying like you're very weird in that you're
Yeah.
you're
Well,
creating these things that are very real and true, and they're just there for the
yeah,
plucking.
yeah. Whoever is interested, I mean, that better gets I think that is better able to get ideas across. A YouTube video does that far better than a university course, Probably, in fact, definitely better because no one wants to be in a university course, and particularly to hear a professor talk about their own research. That's the worst. No, I always like that personally, but that I think most people really hate that stuff.
Hmm.
Also, and make you buy their textbook for $300 or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm the
yeah,
best type of professor. So
yeah. Well,
instead, it's
that's what
just
I'm
free.
saying. Get your textbook and
Yeah,
charge it. Get a
yeah,
link there. All right,
yeah,
and I'll let you smash the bug or do the humanitarian thing of letting it outside, or get your
yeah,
husband
yeah.
to make that
Yeah, get
decision.
him to. Yeah, he can make the decision. It's between him and God, I suppose.
All right, it was a pleasure. I'm going to end the recording now. You
Yeah.
have a good
Thanks for having me,
evening.
man. Cheers. Bye bye.
Cheers. There we go. Thanks, Lady.